make any
Security is tightening as we are now hours away from the historic arraignment of former President Donald Trump right here in Florida.
We're taking this very seriously and that we are prepared for what will happen tomorrow.
What we can expect from the process as he heads to federal court in Miami. Plus, Captiva is working to rebuild stronger for the next storm, but
it's losing the whole image of what the island was.
The proposal that has some saying they'll never come back to Captiva if it passes. And a brutal rape and attack in Lee County after a woman wakes up to a man with his hands around her throat. How deputies say she broke free and the man now behind bars on $1 million bond.
Live from Southwest Florida, this is Fox 4 News at 10.
And thanks for watching Fox 4 News at 10 on this Monday night. I'm Nadine Yanis. All eyes will be on Florida tomorrow ahead of that historic first appearance for former President Donald Trump. Officially traveling from New Jersey and landing in Miami today, set to face that judge at 3 p.m. tomorrow. Trump answering to 37 counts related to his handling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago after he left office. Now, not only is this Trump's second indictment of the year, but it's also the first time a former president will have to answer to federal charges. Now, while Trump has maintained his innocence during a campaign event over the weekend, prosecutors with the Department of Justice allege that he jeopardized national security by hoarding top secret documents at his Florida estate. The charges involve the Espionage Act, which could come with a lengthy prison sentence if Trump is convicted.
For the tens of thousands of people in the federal government, if they did a small fraction of what Trump is accused of, they'd be fired from their jobs.
Now, once he arrives in court tomorrow, Trump will most likely be fingerprinted, maybe get his photo taken, and he'll also get a unique identifying number in the prison system. After Trump's first appearance, the judge is then expected to set a trial date. Meanwhile, some are expressing safety concerns over Trump's court appearance, pointing to what happened during the U.S. Capitol insurrection on January 6, 2021. These concerns coming after a radio interview over the weekend when Trump asked supporters to protest peacefully in front of the courthouse. But Miami officials say they already have tightened their security measures in place. Over the weekend, also, Republicans vying for the GOP presidential nomination solidified their positions on the Trump indictment. Governor Ron DeSantis was among the Republicans who ran to Trump's defense. He actually drew a parallel to Hillary Clinton's email scandal, though the former Secretary of State's emails weren't deliberately withheld, and in that case, there wasn't evidence of obstruction.
And is there a different standard for a Democrat Secretary of State versus a former Republican president? I think there needs to be one standard of justice in this country. Let's enforce it on everybody and make sure we all know the rules.
Now, long shot candidate Vivek Ramaswamy vowed to pardon Trump if he's convicted, alleging the political motive for the indictment. Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who's called out Trump to drop out, said the idea was simply wrong. And former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie wasn't buying Trump's victims' claims either.
People are going to argue about who should and who should not have been indicted and who should be tried. But let me say this. The bigger issue for our country is this the type of conduct that we want from someone who wants to be president of the United States?
As for the Democrats, the White House staying quiet tonight. And in our next half hour, we are going to break down how Trump's Miami indictment is different from a typical prosecution. In the meantime, you can keep up with the developments surrounding Trump's court appearance on fox4now.com. Also back here in Southwest Florida, renewed calls to keep Captiva quaint, as the new owners of the South Seas Resort now want to rebuild even higher and add more units on property. A request, though, that has to be approved by Lee County. Fox 4's Domingo Murray is there now to show us why residents and even wildlife experts do not want this to happen, Domingo.
These plans would allow for buildings to be up to 75 feet high. And for reference, that's about the size of 4 school buses stacked on top of one another. You know, people who live here and visit here say they believe it would sacrifice Captiva's ambiance.
I've been coming here for 10 years. I will never come back.
Susie Casal is visiting Captiva Island for the last time.
We absolutely adored it. This was our go-to vacation place every single year at the beginning of the summer.
It's a place that used to bring her peace as her favorite vacation spot. Now it looks like this. Lee County now considering changing land development codes on Captiva for a potential increase in density and height limits. The new owners at South Seas Island Resort want to build higher, up to 75 feet high, allowing buildings 3 stories above base flood elevation. They also want to increase density per acre. Right now, development codes only allow 3 units per acre. South Seas doesn't want any density restriction, though unclear just how many more units they want to build. James Evans is the CEO of the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation. In this meeting before county commissioners on June 6th, he asked for the issue to be tabled, something nearly 1,000 residents and visitors on Facebook are asking for as well.
Now it's going to become some horrendous little condo-infested tall building, thing that it's losing the whole image of what the island was.
We spoke with South Seas Real Estate on Captiva Island off camera. They said the goal in this proposal is to make the island resilient against future hurricanes.
I find that disheartening to know that people are in such a horrible situation, and instead of helping your community, you're out to make a quick buck.
I think we really need to take a close look at this. I don't think the folks on Sanibel and Captiva have had an ample opportunity to review this, and I know it's going to go to hearing. This is just the first step.
South Seas, again, not wanting to comment on camera tonight. There is a meeting coming up on June 20th, and if you'd like to weigh in, we have information on how to do so on our website. That's fox4now.com. On Captiva Island, Domingo Murray, Fox 4.
All right, Domingo, we'll be sure to follow through for you on that. Well, let's go ahead and shift now over to weather, because probably today would have been a good day to head out to the beach if you were outside at all. Let's bring in meteorologist Andrew Shipley, because boy, did those feels like temperatures feel really hot, Andrew.
Oh yeah, but triple digits. I'm jealous of Domingo there. Looks like a beautiful night there to be on the beach. But inland, we are still tracking some showers and storms out in the Moorhaven, Whidden Corner, LaBelle area. But these are starting to fizzle on now. But the big story story continues to be the dew points here today. They've been in anywhere from the humid to soupy range. Right now, 75. Well, that's right in the soupy range. That means we're still looking at very humid conditions and feels like temperatures even at 10 o'clock at night, still feeling like 92 degrees here in Fort Myers, 95 in Naples, despite the actual temperatures being in the 70s and 80s at this hour. Now, if you're looking at the next couple hours, though, I do expect temperatures to finally actually drop into the 70s here in Fort Myers, not till 4 o'clock in the morning. Overnight lows about 78 degrees, definitely above normal temperatures. We're going to do this all again tomorrow. I'll walk you through it coming up.
All right, Andrew, thank you. Well, a ride home from a Fort Myers nightclub turned into a terrifying nightmare for one woman after the Lee County Sheriff's Office says a man kidnapped and brutally raped her. Deputies say 24-year-old Julio Velasquez is now behind bars for the assault. Sheriff Carmine Marcina says Velasquez approached the victim when she was leaving the Romance nightclub on Palm Beach Boulevard and offered her a ride home. But instead of taking her home, deputies say he took her to a wooded area and brutally beat her until she fell unconscious and then raped her.
She was in a fight for her life. The victim awoke to the suspect raping her with his hands around her neck, threatening to kill her.
Absolutely horrifying. So deputies say that victim was able to get away and knocked on several doors in a nearby neighborhood until she finally got someone to call for help. They say she is still recovering. As for Velasquez, he's being held on a $1 million bond, facing sexual battery and kidnapping charges. His next court date set for July 10th. Also, the Cape Coral Police Department say they have arrested a VA hospital janitor for trying to stab his supervisor with scissors last Friday. This, according to an arrest report. The supervisor told police that 76-year-old William Size became violent when they called him into their office to discipline him for raising his voice in the facility while working. The supervisor told police that Size then tried to stab him with keys and then grabbed a pair of scissors and went for his neck. Luckily, police say the supervisor was able to get the scissors out of his hands. Size now facing aggravated assault and battery charges. Also tonight, the investigation continues into the events that led up to a Cape Coral police officer shooting and killing a 73-year-old man who they say pulled a gun on officers over the weekend. This all happened last night on Northeast 5th Lane near Pine Island Road in Del Prado. Cape Coral police responding to a call about two roommates having a disagreement. When they arrived, they say they found Roland Henry Hale intoxicated. Officers say Hale pulled a gun on them, and that's when they shot him several times. Cape Coral Police says this was the third time they were called to that location over the weekend. The officers in this case were not hurt. They say Hale's roommate was outside when the shooting happened. The officers involved, though, are on administrative leave per Cape PD protocol. Also tonight, Marco Island police are looking for someone they say stole a golf cart from the Marriott right there on South Collier Boulevard and then ran over a sea turtle nest south of Residence Beach. They say all this happened overnight, but luckily Florida Fish and Wildlife say no turtles were hurt. All right, well, coming up next, Fox 4 is watching out for residents in Cape Coral, revisiting a neighborhood plagued with flooding problems. We're following through to see when the city will finally fix it as we are in rainy season. Plus, Northport city leaders bringing solutions to the problems they face after deadly flooding there during Hurricane Ian. Their candidness on what went wrong and what they're now fixing ahead of the next storm, Andrew.
And you're looking to get out in the boat tomorrow, looking at winds out of southwest, 5 to 10 knots, seas 1-2 feet. The Gulf temperature, 87 degrees, maybe still a nice place to cool off. I'll break down what you can expect on your Tuesday. Coming up.
Well, tonight, Fox 4 has learned that projects meant to fix flooding concerns in Cape Coral are now delayed because of Hurricane Ian. This includes one project to improve drainage on Hancock Bridge Parkway. You could see just how bad the flooding could get there. Fox 4's Colton Chavez tells us now when the work is expected to start.
In Cape Coral, the soundtrack for summer afternoons can sound a lot like this. But what you see looming in the dark clouds, for people like Rafael Rodriguez, who lives on Hancock Bridge Parkway,
first, I'm worried.
He's worried about this. Just last week, we showed you flooding captured on Rafael's cell phone, which he says is from afternoon storms that were supposed to be fixed by a Cape Coral drainage improvement project. A project including 7 others a City of Cape Coral spokesperson now tells me was delayed so city efforts could be focused around Hurricane Ian.
5 minutes or hard raining, it's full of water in the street.
Last year was when I first spoke with Rafael about his flooding concerns, back on September 14th, just 2 weeks before Hurricane Ian. Cell phone video from back then mirrors what Rafael says he's seeing now.
All properties are going to be messy.
A mess the City of Cape Coral is working to clean up, telling me all of the flooding and drainage projects are now back on track, but says Hancock Bridge Parkway construction won't begin until after the final drainage improvement design, which the city hopes to have complete by December of this year. For Rafael, he says that means placing sandbags like he did last year to keep floodwater from entering his home is something he will have to do again to weather the daily storms.
I'm going to put in the front, only to stop the wave, not the water.
That was Colton Chavez reporting, where we are staying in Lee County for this next story. Restroom and shower trailers are closing now 8 months after Ian because of a decline in usage. These trailers are located at Beach Baptist Church on Fort Myers Beach, San Carlos Maritime Park on San Carlos Island, and Flamingo Bay Mobile Home Park on Pine Island. They have been so instrumental for so many people, but the stations will be removed at 10 a.m. next Monday. Laundry facilities, though, will stay in place for those locations until June 28th. And in Northport, the city is working on ways to improve its hurricane response ahead of the next big storm. The mayor there says one of the shortfalls during Ian was the Emergency Operations Center, which lost communication and power after the generators failed. She also wants to upgrade the city's infrastructure utilizing a local radio station.
Aligning and integrating our infrastructure so that the city can break into WKDW's programming in times of emergency.
Now, the mayor says there were successes, too, like the community pulling together immediately after the storm. And boy, is that true. So many people coming together. You know, Andrew and I were on the desk together when we saw the flooding in Northport. It didn't come the day that Ian hit. It came a couple of days after that rain coming back down.
Yeah, it was all that rain. That 16, 17, 18 inches up through Orlando, all flowed down, leading to that flooding. And we were watching rescues in live time.
It was really incredible, the helicopters saving people. And for Northport to look at what they need to fix is really amazing at this point.
Absolutely. And as we're now in hurricane season, means even that much more. But here tonight, we are tracking still some showers and storms out in Whitting Corner, Moorhaven, out towards Shawnee and Clewiston. This is pretty much the only show in town right now, but because most of us are dealing with clear skies right now. Take a look outside right now in the Cape. Looking at pretty much crystal clear, other than that cloud there on the right-hand side. Other than that, but just dealing with the humidity. Still at this hour, feeling like 89 degrees, thanks to that elevated humidity. Even places like Naples feeling like 95 at 10:20 at night. But actual temperatures sitting there at 84 degrees. Inland, out towards Lake, 78, Moorhaven, Clewiston, 77 at this time. But just take a look at the next couple hours, struggling to get out of the 80s. Finally, 79 degrees there by 4 o'clock in the morning, and we're only going to be dropping another degree from there. 78 is going to be that overnight low temperature for you, running about 4 degrees above normal for you here tonight, and then we do it again tomorrow. Pretty much more of the same. Temperatures in the low to mid 90s out across Southwest Florida, plus dealing with that higher humidity, meaning feels like temperatures again widespread into the triple digits, feeling like 105 in places like LaBelle, Arcadia, 102, Cape Coral. About 100 degrees, feeling like they're in Naples. So maybe heat exhaustion could be a factor in things tomorrow. So I got some tips for you. Light, loose clothing for you. Drinking plenty of non-alcoholic fluids, Gatorades, waters. Staying hydrated if you're out there. Limiting those outdoor activities as well to not the peak heating times. Also, take breaks. If you're doing strenuous work outside, doing yard work, or you work outside, take breaks, drink again, plenty of water, also watching your kids, pets in the car, and maybe staying in the AC if you can, and staying out of the heat. Also, looking at a place to cool off, beach maybe not a terrible idea. Gulf temperature is 87, so it's not cool, but it's at least cooler than the air, so you'll feel a little bit more refreshing. Surf 1 foot or less, low rip currents risk out there as well. Let me just walk you through the day, though. I am expecting mostly sunny skies there in the morning hours. They get into about noontime. That's when we'll watch some storms bubbling up inland, and then we'll be moving from west to east, closer out towards Lake O, and then off towards the East Coast. The East Coast is going to see majority of any shower and storm chances for us. So if you're on the coast, should be nice and quiet for you pretty much throughout the day on Tuesday. Now, as we move through the week ahead, I am expecting still most of our shower and storm chances to be inland each and every day for us. Actually, Thursday, for the most part, is going to be a dry day, but we'll keep those inland storm chances into the weekend. Temperature-wise, low to mid-90s, but when you add in that humidity each and every day, we are going to be dealing with those triple-digit heat indices all the way through the weekend, so making sure that you have that plan in place to keep cool each and every day, Nadine.
Includes a lot of water, Andrew. Thank you. Well, a worker shortage plaguing our agriculture industry has now federal officials looking for new ways to fill the gap. How the USDA is now hoping to bring more migrant workers on board and the impact it could have on Florida families. Well, with a worker shortage in industries across the country, many American farmers are relying on migrant workers to fill the gap. Now, the H-2A visa program allows temporary visas for migrants to work in the agriculture industry. But having a visa doesn't mean that these families can necessarily afford to live here or even feel safe in a state given new immigration laws. Stassi Olmos with our Script station, WFTS in Tampa, tells us about a new incentive now from the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
It's another day of picking peppers on this farm in Plant City. For workers like Flor, it's been a very long 3 years.
During the pandemic, we didn't have another option to either, stay. We came to work with precaution. We were afraid.
That's why the USDA is deploying $671 million in grants to food and farm workers across the country through nonprofits like the Hispanic Federation.
Recognizing the sacrifice that they and their families have made to work during the pandemic, so all of us could have food on our tables.
According to the Economic Policy Institute, more than 2 million farm workers were deemed essential during the pandemic to sustain supply chains. On average, they earned $14.62 an hour, but migrant farm workers brought in on the H-2A work visas made less at an average of $13.68 per hour, and even lower in Florida at $11.71 an hour. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many businesses suffered, but they would have suffered even more if it weren't for these workers tirelessly plowing and picking the fields.
Here in Florida specifically, our goal is to work with 12,000 farm workers.
The assistance is a one-time payment of $600 available for anyone who worked on a farm from 2020 to 2023.
It's a big help, especially during the time now that the job is a little slower.
Stassi Olmos with that story. And while St. Matthew's House leaders say they've been helping feed many migrant farm workers in Immokalee at their walk-up distributions, today they say they helped feed 525 families at their drive-through distribution in Naples. They say nearly 50 cars were lined up at the Paradise Sports Complex 3 hours before this event was even set to start. That just shows the need there. Leaders say the need is always great during the summer, but even more so after Ian.
They're like in an unstable time right now for the families. They're in a crisis mode. They're just trying to survive. A lot of them are selling their car. They're looking for another part-time job to really take over those expenses, especially since a lot of them went through a hurricane. They lost everything, and they're just looking for a way out.
Yeah, a lot of our families are struggling right now. So today was the first of 5 distributions this week. The next one is on Wednesday at Limitless Church in Immokalee, then Centerpoint Community Church in Naples on Thursday, followed by 2 on Friday at the Golden Gate Senior Center in Naples and Florida Southwestern State College in LaBelle. Well, today marks 7 years when a gunman walked into an Orlando nightclub and killed 49 people. Coming up, we take you to the Pulse Remembrance and hear from some of the first responders reflecting on that dark day. Also, we are looking ahead to the arraignment of former President Donald Trump tomorrow in Miami. He's looking ahead to what's happening afterwards, where Trump is expected to speak following his federal court appearance. families, survivors, and law enforcement reflecting on 7 years since the Pulse nightclub shooting.
Regardless of where we come from or anything like that, we're here to support each other.
The promise from city leaders tonight and the state of hate in the aftermath of this tragedy as Fox 4 News at 10 continues.
Live from Southwest Florida, this is Fox 4 News at 10.
We saved dozens of lives. Unfortunately, this very evil individual, it took 49 lives from us.
Yeah, that was Orange County Sheriff John Mina reflecting on his response to the Pulse nightclub shooting now 7 years ago. He was the chief of police at the Orlando Police Department when the gunman walked into that popular gay club and opened fire, killing 49 people. I was reporting on this day, one of the hardest days of my career in Orlando. Now, the victims, though, were remembered today with the unveiling of a 4-foot wide mural, the ringing of church bells, and an overnight vigil at the site of the Pulse nightclub. Orlando's Mayor Buddy Dyer also vowing to continue support for the survivors and the victims' families. As we look back on the tragedy, the Southern Poverty Law Center is also sounding the alarm about the state of hate speech against the LGBTQ+ community today, pointing to new laws banning gender-affirming care and drag shows.
I think all of those are examples of this encoding, right, of hate and extremism into state legislatures, into state laws by legislatures who have been embracing, right, a lot of the anti-LGBTQ messages coming from the hard right.
And former Orlando State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith is an openly gay Democrat. He's now running for state Senate. He says Florida lawmakers have abandoned the lessons learned from the Pulse shooting.
It's been 7 years, and yet we know that many Florida politicians have forgotten some of the lessons that we learned after Pulse nightclubs. The lesson of treating every person with dignity and respect, the lesson of choosing love over hate.
Meanwhile, Republicans like Senator Rick Scott and Senator Marco Rubio marked the tragedy with a resolution to honor the 49 victims. The resolution passed the U.S. Senate unanimously. Rubio issuing a statement saying, quote, "The 49 victims of this senseless act of violence were more than just numbers. They were sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, friends, and neighbors. They were members of our community, and they will never be forgotten," end quote. Well, back to tomorrow. Former President Donald Trump is scheduled to appear in federal court in Miami. He faces 37 counts related to the handling of classified documents found at his Mar-a-Lago estate. This after he left office. It will mark the first time a former president will answer to federal charges. Again, this is happening at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Joe St. George explains what else makes this federal case different from the others.
The prosecution of former President Donald Trump here at this Miami federal courthouse, very different from a typical prosecution that you would see at this federal courthouse or a federal courthouse near you. For instance, in a typical federal case, a United States attorney brings the charge. U.S. attorneys report to the Attorney General, who right now is Merrick Garland. But that's not what's happening here. Attorney General Garland, many months ago, recognized that this case was always going to have some accusations of political bias. That is why a special counsel was appointed. Jack Smith, someone who previously prosecuted war crimes in The Hague. He previously prosecuted other elected officials. He is the special prosecutor. Although, to be clear, Mr. Smith still needed the approval of Attorney General Garland to indict former President Trump. One of the biggest challenges for the special counsel, whenever this case ultimately goes to a jury, is convincing that jury that this is not politically motivated in some way. Over the weekend, former President Trump campaigned and said he's the victim here. As a reminder, this is now the second indictment of the former president. He faced a New York indictment earlier this year. This indictment, though, according to legal experts, is considered to be much more serious. This is a federal charge. The New York indictment were state charges. This case in Miami deals with allegations of the Espionage Act, for instance, while the New York case deals with falsifying business records, allegedly. Of course, there remains many questions about whether or not this case at this federal courthouse in Miami will actually go to trial before some of the major political events that happen next year, such as the Republican National Convention. While the special counsel has already said they want a speedy trial here, many legal experts believe the legal strategy of former President Trump will be to try and delay this as much as possible. Joe St. George, Scripps News, Miami.
We will see what will happen. Meantime, the former president is planning to hold a political fundraiser at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey tomorrow after his federal court appearance. He is expected to give a speech at that event. It does come after his weekend appearance at the Georgia's GOP convention, where he denied any wrongdoing and attacked special counsel Jack Smith. Well, covering Florida tonight, a Pinellas County woman is expected to survive after she was shot 11 times yesterday, getting help after she willed herself to walk to her neighbor's house, who called 911. This is incredible. This all happened around 1:30 in the morning. Pinellas County deputies were called out to the house in Seminole, Florida, where deputies say the woman living there was shot 11 times by a man she was related to, though they aren't saying the relation here. They only identified the suspect as Wayne Lovell Dew. After she was shot, the victim was able to tell deputies that Dew was still in the house with several guns and rifles before she was then rushed to the hospital. Deputies were amazed by her strength to survive.
It's amazing. You think of somebody who's been shot that many times that is still able to walk out of her house, walk across the street to the neighbor and tell them what happened.
Yeah, so the standoff took place at that home, lasting nearly 10 hours before deputies found Dew dead inside with a single gunshot to his head. They believe it was self-inflicted. Well, tonight, the final goodbyes for the Marion County mother of 4 who was shot through the door by her neighbor 10 days ago. Reverend Al Sharpton delivering the eulogy for A.J. Owens at a church in Ocala today, calling for justice for this 35-year-old mother of 4 who deputies said was killed in front of her own 9-year-old son after knocking on her neighbor's door. The family has also hired prominent attorney Ben Crump to represent them in this case. Crump criticizing Marion County deputies for taking several days to make an arrest. Deputies said it was to rule out stand your ground, which is not justifiable in this case.
We're going to stand our ground for respect for AJ. We're going to stand our ground for the dignity of AJ. We're going to stand our ground.
That 8-year-old neighbor, Susan Lorenz, now faces first-degree manslaughter charges for her killing. Well, as we recognize Pride Month this June, we are taking a closer look at some of the issues facing the LGBTQ+ community. Nationwide, we've seen a record number of anti-trans legislation introduced at both state and the federal level as well. And as Chris Conti found out, that's creating an increase in transgender people becoming homeless.
According to the National Center for Transgender Equality, 1 in 5 transgender people have experienced homelessness in their lives. Family rejection and discrimination play a large part in why that is. But I'm going to show you some efforts underway to help this often overlooked community. Forgotten and overlooked, ignored and passed right by. For many homeless people in this country, choice was taken out of the equation long ago, especially in the trans community.
Most times when folks who are trans come out, they're experiencing homeless very young. 16, 17, 18, they're being kicked out.
That is Mary Wilson. I sat down with her recently in Atlanta, a city that has no shortage of homeless issues. Wilson is the program director for a group called the Trans Housing Coalition. Their goal is to help transgender people who have found themselves homeless. 1 in 5 transgender people experience homelessness.
Yes.
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. We get referrals constantly.
According to translegislation.com, a record 556 anti-trans bills have been introduced in 2023 across 49 states, and 27 national anti-trans bills have been brought before Congress. The impacts on homelessness, advocates say, have been immediate. A lot of the anti-trans legislation going on right now, has it made things worse? Has it created more homelessness or more uncertainty within the community?
Yeah, so what's happening now is we're seeing an influx of emails of people saying, like, I'm fleeing Florida, I'm fleeing this place. There are people now, what's happening and that we're seeing a huge thing is that people are coming to Atlanta to be homeless to get more care.
You're already seeing the impacts of the anti-trans legislation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so, and you're seeing people scared.
There is no national group dedicated to helping homeless trans people, but dozens exist across the U.S. There's more complexities.
Yeah, I think it's the whole gender and sex thing that people don't understand. I think it's harder. What they face is just very, very, very unique. I'm not trans, but even being in here, being part of the community, I thought I kind of knew, but being in it, it's very, very, very hard.
The Trans Housing Coalition helps with emergency hotel stays. They even facilitate training with landlords to minimize discrimination that many advocates say exists when someone who is trans tries to secure rental housing. And in the middle of Pride Month, advocates say attention to the issue is key in getting people help.
Does it feel like as much of a celebration maybe as years past? Does it feel a little more like a fight, or is it the same or different?
It feels like both. You know what I mean? It feels like both. It does feel like a fight with everything that's happened. It's very disappointing and it's very stressful. But it also feels like, you know, we're here. This is who we are.
At the end of the day, their goal is to make sure the homeless trans community doesn't feel forgotten or ignored. Wisconsin, Scripps News, Atlanta.
Well, now to this story. After 41 years, Pat Sajak announces that he will be retiring as host of Wheel of Fortune. Sajak joined the show in 1982, spitting his charm and the show into syndication, where it quickly became one of the most successful game shows in history. Posting on Twitter today, this season, which starts in September, will be his last. We got a bonus round here, though. An executive with Sony Pictures says Sajak will work as a consultant on the show for 3 years once his hosting duties end. Well, coming up here on Fox 4 News at 10, blue-green algae in Lake Okeechobee flowing down to southwest Florida through the Caloosahatchee River is now prompting one health alert in Fort Myers shores last week, why experts believe we could be in for more alerts like this one. And wildlife officials wrangled this crocodile out of someone's pool this weekend. How big they say it was when they finally got him out. He's probably trying to stay cool, Andrew.
Yeah, for real. But let's take a look at the tropics. Good news is no tropical development is expected over the next 7 days. But what I am expecting over the next 7 days, a lot more heat. I'll break that down coming up.
Well, last week, the Florida Department of Health in Lee County issued a blue-green algae alert for the Davis boat ramp area right along the Caloosahatchee in Fort Myers Shore. And while it only impacts that area, tonight some worry that more warnings could be coming in the wake of Hurricane Ian. Rochelle Aileen with our Scripps station, WFTX in Tampa, spoke with two algae experts currently working on getting answers for us right here in Southwest Florida.
Ian's destructive path caused catastrophic flooding in many areas. And as many work to clean up the pieces left behind, some worry that all of that water mixing together could lead to harmful algal blooms. To learn more about the possibility,
this one also makes anatoxin.
We went down to Florida Gulf Coast University to talk to Dr. Barry Rosen,
So if I look down here,
who studies the bacteria that makes blue-green algae. And while he says the possibility for a blue-green bloom is technically there,
it may or may not be. It's a difficult thing to know exactly what's going to happen. That mix of compounds that flowed in with the hurricane.
he's also not totally convinced it will happen because of the very specific mixture of light and nutrients that need to be in place for a bloom. He also adds that the season for that type of bacteria is all but over.
They should be just about gone by now. Yeah, because they like warm weather.
But what Dr. Rosen does say is that some of that leftover bacteria, under the right conditions, could become food for a different but equally harmful bloom, red tide.
There is speculation that it flares up right after hurricanes, but it tends to start in October.
A few labs over at FGCU, Dr. Mike Parsons and his team are working hard to set up a post-hurricane analysis of local waters. He tells ABC Action News it's important to note that small red tide blooms happen around this time every year.
It occurs almost like clockwork.
But hurricanes can make things worse.
When you looked at Hurricane Irma in 2017, I think that was on September 10th, 2017. Red tide started blooming a couple weeks later, but then it just got bigger, lasted longer, and so the question was, it wasn't necessarily did Irma cause red tide, but did it exacerbate it?
And as they work to track Ian's impact, Dr. Parsons tells us while a bigger bloom is possible, pinpointing the cause right now isn't clear.
I think it's too soon to say there's a correlation. It's at least coincidental, though.
And that was Rochelle Aileen reporting. Two things that help these blooms grow are heat and nutrient runoff from those rainy days, things that we are seeing almost every day here in Southwest Florida as we bring in meteorologist Andrew Shipley. And Andrew, you are keeping a close eye on these algae blooms.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we keep an eye on is the rain, especially flowing into Lake O, actually from the Orlando area, coming down the Kissimmee watershed. And that's what's helping feed those blooms on Lake O. And then those blooms then, if get opened up, go down the Caloosahatchee. It's all one big cycle here, but we are tracking rain here tonight out near Lake O, Whidden Corner, Shawnee, Lewiston for you at this time. But most of us are just seeing clear skies. Take a look outside right now. This is down the Bayfront Inn in the Naples area here tonight, and the big thing for you in Naples is the humidity here tonight, still making those temperatures feel like they're in the mid-90s. 95 as that feels like temperature, still at almost 11 o'clock at night. Actual temperature 84 degrees, 82 here at the Cape. How about 77 Lewiston at this hour? And if you take a look at the next couple hours, we do expect those clear skies, but not getting down into the 70s for widespread. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's about where the low is going to be, about 78 degrees and 4 degrees above normal for this time of year. So a warm night for us. As for tomorrow, well, the warm stretch continues as we're looking at high temperatures in the low to mid 90s, say 95 in Arcadia, 93 here in Fort Myers, but you add in humidity. That means those feels like temperatures up into the triple digits again tomorrow, feeling like 105 in Arcadia. How about 102 in Cape Coral for you? So you want to make plans for that heat, making sure you wear that light colored, loose fitting clothing. You're drinking non-alcoholic fluids, Gatorades, water, staying hydrated, limiting that outdoor activities, especially from the peak heating times. And if you do have to be outside, taking breaks, rest. Again, you don't want to get yourself overheated. making sure your kids or pets are not in your hot car, as well as maybe staying in the AC if you can. But if you're looking to maybe still be outside, maybe find a cooler place to be, one of those splash pads, or go to the beach maybe. Beach tomorrow looking about 87 degrees. That Gulf temperature, surf 1 foot or less. But let me just time out the day for you. Sunny skies in the morning, though you get into about noontime. We'll watch for some storms bubbling up, but that's going to be inland shower storms. Talking Glades, Henry, inland Collier County, and these are going to be pushing off to the east coast. So if you're on the coastline tomorrow, I'm looking pretty dry for you tomorrow, but hot in terms of the temperatures. How much rain we're talking? Well, very hit and miss, but some localized amounts, upwards of about an inch worth of rain, not out of the question for some of our inland communities. But really for the week ahead, we're going to keep rain chances right around 50% the next 2 days. Going to end mainly inland, a little drier on Thursday, and then we can keep those inland storms for us Friday and Saturday. But we're keeping that humidity up as well, and that means we need to keep an eye on the humidity over the next several days. Still looking at feels like temperatures into the weekend up into the triple digits for you. So that hot weather is not going anywhere anytime soon. Take a look at just temperatures over the next 7 days. 93, 94 each and every day, with those inland shower and storm chances continuing into the weekend.
Yeah, and then take a look at this, Andrew. This crocodile probably trying to stay cool. Florida Fish and Wildlife agents responded to reports of a 10-foot crocodile in a homeowner's backyard pool over the weekend. This happening on Sunday morning in Plantation. Key agents struggled with the crocodile, but were able to remove it from the pool and relocate it to its natural habitat. What's interesting is usually we see gators in pools, not a lot of crocodiles. They're actually a threatened species here in Florida and endangered everywhere else in the U.S. We'll be right back. Well, ahead on Fox 4 News at 11, we're now hours away from former President Donald Trump's arraignment, where he faces 37 counts over his handling of classified documents. What to expect?